news to you, because the gospel is good news, but for people who don't know Jesus, it's not that good, is it? It is in an ultimate sense, but what's required for it to be good to you? Yeah.
Eyes open and your heart softened.
Eyes open, heart softened. Okay. What does Jesus say? You know the answer. Starts with a B. Faith, belief. Belief, right? What good does the gospel to you if you don't believe in it? Does it help you at all? Is it good for you? It's not good news without belief, right? So belief is the requirement for the good news to actually be good in your life, to actually impact you. It is the thing that is required for you to experience the good news, not just know the good news. Good news isn't good if you just know it, right? All the good news that I knew when I told my one friend who asked me what the gospel was is useless to him. He doesn't remember any of that, and he's still living without Jesus. That knowledge is not helpful to him unless there's belief. So what is belief then? What does belief mean? When I talk about belief, I'm going to define it as to think, feel, and live as though it's true. Keith's amazing, by the way. Keith last night kind of said belief precedes action, right? Keith said that you believe first, and then you act or behave is the language that Keith used. I actually don't think that. I actually think that behavior is a part of belief. I don't think anybody does anything that they don't believe in some ultimate sense or some deep sense. I think that every choice that we make, every thought that we have, all of our behavior can be traced back to a belief about something. And I think action is part of belief. I don't think it's a separate thing, and I don't think it's a thing that comes after. So when I say belief, I mean to think, feel, and live as though something is true. So to believe something is not to just think that it might be true. If you don't live as though it's true, I don't think you believe it. I think you might half believe it, but you also believe other things that are deeper, that are controlling your behavior, that are taking over, and that are prioritized over that belief. Do you agree with me? Are you unsure about that? When I say belief, I mean to think and to feel and to live as though something is true. And so when you think and live as though the gospel is true, when you think, feel, and live as though the gospel is true, in an ultimate sense, what did we say happens? You experience salvation, eternity with God, peace in an ultimate sense, relationship with God. Keith talked about you become a son of God, an heir of God, a child of God. These are all in an ultimate sense. That's what, when you live as though the gospel is true, when you believe it, believe in your heart, confess with your mouth, when you believe it and you live as though it's true, you get those things in an ultimate sense, but you also get things in a temporal sense, right here and now. There are very good benefits to believing the gospel is true, to living as though the gospel is true. You experience sanctification. Sanctification is the process of becoming more like who God always intended you to be. You're made in the image of God, and you become more like God as you are sanctified. You start to reflect his image. That's what sanctification is. And so you are sanctified. You become more like how God intended you to be. The choices that you make tend to reflect godliness. They tend to work out better for you when you make choices that are in line with the gospel, when you believe, i.e. live as though the gospel is true. And then what happens when you don't? At least for you guys, you're Christian people, most of you, I'm assuming. What happens for you when you don't live as though the gospel is true? When you make choices that are contrary to what the gospel would suggest? What happens? Things don't go that well. Any married people here? Yeah, exactly. Guys, when I treat my wife as though the gospel isn't true, yikes, right? It's not good. It's not good. It doesn't work out that well. For me, for her, for our family, for our community, it's not great. And so gospel fluency is learning to call out the unbelief and to call towards belief. Gospel fluency is learning to call out the unbelief and to call towards belief. That's what gospel fluency is. If I'm to sum it up, it's to learn to call out the unbelief and call towards belief. Not just in an ultimate one-time sense. We're talking every single day, every single choice, every single thought, every single feeling. We can choose a path of belief or we can choose a path of unbelief. For example, let's say I'm in college or I'm in high school, seniors. You guys call seniors. In Canada, we call you grade 12. We don't really call you seniors. Do we call you seniors? No. Seniors are basically grade 11 and 12, and then juniors are grade 9 and 10 or something like that. So it's a little different. But you're a senior. You're in high school, right? Halfway through the year, you've applied to your top 5 schools. Is anybody a senior here? And you've applied to the schools, and have you heard back from those schools? So yeah, you did. You're sitting there in like your second semester waiting to hear back from those schools, and you're anxious, right? You're a senior in high school, you're anxious, you're waiting to hear back from the 5 schools that you want to go to. And you're so anxious that you start to kind of be a little bit short-tempered with your siblings and your parents. You start to be a little bit more reactive. You start to develop a few bad habits. You're jumping on your phone way more than you were before. You're a lot less patient about things. Maybe you're starting to self-medicate in some ways, or you're binge-watching Netflix because you're anxious. You're so anxious, you're waiting to hear back from these 5 schools that you've applied for. What happens if I don't get into one of these schools? What is my life? What is that anxiety driven by? What is the belief behind it? What am I believing about my life, about myself, and about my identity that's leading to all that anxiety and ultimately to behavior that I probably wouldn't do if I was a little less anxious? What am I believing? In that scenario, you're probably believing that your identity is caught up in the school that you attend. And not just that, but you're thinking about the school that you're going to attend, and you're thinking about what you're going to do career-wise after that. And you're thinking that I can only get there if I go to here. And I'm going to have this college experience, and I'm going to need to have this college experience because that's who I am. I believe that's who I am. I'm going to have this experience. I'm going to live this life. And if I don't get this experience, then who am I? My identity's crushed. I'm devastated. I don't know which way to go at that point. I had my whole life planned out. What is it that you're believing about yourself? And does the gospel address that? Does the gospel address the anxiety you have about the school that you're going to go to in the fall? Does the gospel address that? What does the gospel say about it? The gospel says that Jesus Christ is your Lord. Your identity is fully found in Him. The gospel says that God will use you wherever you are if you submit your life to Him and you follow in His ways. The gospel says that it's not a particular school or a particular career path or a particular community that you live in that is what's going to fulfill you in your life with Christ. The gospel says that God will take you where He wants you, and He will use you for what He wants to use you for if you fully give your life to God. And if you believe that, how anxious are you about what school you end up getting into? Probably a little less. What about this example? We've got some teenage boys here that are from our group. You're 16, right? You fell in love. 16, fell in love. That's it. You've been looking for love for a long time, right? You're 16, finally found her. You've been single your whole life. And she loves you back. She loves you back. You're dating for 6 months. At this point, you've planned out your future. You've talked about how many kids and what their names are going to be, right? I understand. I was there. You've already planned out where you're going to go to school together and then how you're going to get married in the future. You've got this all figured out. You've got this all planned out. You've fantasized. You've dreamed about your future together because you're in love and you're going to get married. And your youth pastor says, slow down. You're probably not going to get married. And you're like, nah, I'm getting married, right? We're getting married young. We're going to start life young. We're in love. And a few text messages come in later than you anticipate. It's things are kind of losing steam a little bit. She says, it's not you, it's me, right? It's not you, it's me, but I just don't think we're right for one another, right? Boom. Crushed. Seriously crushed, actually crushed, genuinely crushed. First of all, you know that it's you. It's not her, it's you, right? You know that. You're not attractive enough, you're not smart enough, you're not cool enough, you're not going to make enough money, right? You don't love Jesus enough, whatever it is, you know it's you. And then you start feeling super insecure about yourself. You wonder if you'll ever be loved again. How many teenage, and I'm talking teenage boys here, how many of them feel like no one will ever love them? So many. Yes, I didn't tell you to put your hands up, but thanks for being honest with me, bro. Do you want to come tell us your story? No? Okay. Yeah, crushed. And your friends, they're trying to console you, they're trying to care for you, they're trying to share love with you, but it's nothing's working, right? It's you just crushed. It's understandable. What are you believing? What is the belief? What do you believe? And does the gospel address that? Does the gospel say anything about that? Does it provide hope or answers to that? It does. I've given you a few examples, and you're probably thinking, you're talking to a group of Christians who already know the gospel, and I came here to learn how to talk to my friends who don't know the gospel. I don't know if that's what you're thinking. I'm thinking that about myself right now. You thought this was about sharing the gospel with people who don't know Jesus. Let me ask you this question. I don't know if I have a slide. I do. What's the difference between you experiencing these examples and your friends who don't know Jesus experiencing them? What's the difference between the two of you? These were real to you, I hope. I'm a few years removed from high school, so I don't know what's, maybe for you the most drastic thing is your snap streak ending. I found out about snap streaks like 2 weeks ago, and my mind is blown at some of my students and how long they've gone Snapchatting each other, and the fact that they've given their password to friends just to keep their streak alive. That is crazy to me. That's crazy. But maybe that's it for you. I don't know what it is for you, but you've experienced these things. You experience these same hurts, these same anxieties, these same heartaches, right? It's not a whole lot different between you and your friends at school who don't know Jesus, is there? It's the same stuff. So what is the difference between the two of you experiencing these things in life, these difficulties, these trials, the suffering, the chaos? What's the difference between the two of you? Are you living with different levels of unbelief, or is it the same unbelief that is causing the same anxiety and shame and guilt and fear? Is it the same, or is it different? What's different about it? Is the hope that the gospel offers you in these circumstances any different than the hope offered to your friends who don't quite know or understand the gospel yet? Is it a different hope? Or is it the same hope? What do you need to be told by your youth pastor when you're going through this? What hope do you need? You want to answer? Yeah, go for it. When you don't understand, it's more fictitious. It's not really real. It's only real when you understand it. Okay?
So, if you know about God and you don't believe, then it's kind of a choice. If you don't even know, then you don't even have a chance to make a choice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually the answer. Good job, bro. What's your name? You're a wise guy. You've got friends who experience the same frustrations, confusions, anxieties, right? They're going through the same stuff. Does the gospel offer them hope? Is it a different hope, or is it the same hope? What is the difference between you and the people who don't know Jesus? The difference is that you have full access to the gospel because you've been given access to it, right? If you're here hearing me right now, you've got far more than your friends who don't know Jesus. You've got all the access you need. And you're going to make decisions, and you're not going to access it, and that's a choice that you make. But you've got full access. You've got pastors and leaders who will communicate that to you. Hopefully you have friends who will push you in that direction. When you're living in unbelief, you have full access to the belief that you need to live in to experience the hope that the gospel provides in all of life's experiences and circumstances. You have that. What's the difference between you and your friends who don't know Jesus? Not just the kid who shows up to youth group but hasn't given his faith fully yet. I'm talking the people who don't know Jesus. I'm talking people who don't come to church and hear the gospel every week, who don't have a relationship with your youth pastor, who have never actually heard the gospel or understand the gospel in any kind of way. What's the difference? The difference is really one step. They're one step removed, right? They're one step removed from the gospel. And what is that step? What is the step? Who is the step? The Holy Spirit's the right answer. Jesus is the right answer. People don't know the gospel unless someone goes and tells them. Somebody said that in the Bible somewhere. Right? What's the step? You are the step. The only difference between the two of you is that you have full access with the Holy Spirit living inside of you. And you have full access to the gospel. You've been exposed to it. You've heard it before. And you just need to step up, go remind yourself, and start living in belief again. Be disciplined, repent of your sin, and live in belief. The difference with your friends who don't know Jesus, they don't know that. They don't have that. And they're looking for you for that. They don't have the hope that you have. So let me reiterate that the gospel isn't a simple set of dogmatic statements about the nature of God and the work that Jesus did on the cross. That's not what the gospel is. The gospel is the reality that Jesus is the Lord. The gospel is the reality that the kingdom of God is at hand, that Jesus is the king, and that things in God's kingdom are way better than things outside God's kingdom. It's good news because it actually gives you eternal life, but it actually gives you life and life to the full here and now. It's good news because it provides you hope in all of life's difficulties, and the stresses, the anxieties, the frustrations, the hurt. The gospel of Jesus Christ offers you hope in all of life's circumstances, in all of life's difficulties. That's what the gospel is. You have it and your friends don't. And when we live in belief, we experience life transformation. We experience the life that God has for us. We don't live with anxiety about what school we're going to be at. We're not completely devastated by our 16-year-old breakup. We know that there's a future. We know who we are in Christ. Francis Schaeffer, he's a theologian. He once said this. I'm going to read this for you. Actually, I'll put it up for you too. If I only have an hour with someone, I'll spend the first 55 minutes asking them questions and finding out what is troubling their heart and their mind. And then in the last 5 minutes, I'll try to share some truth that provides them hope in their circumstances. First 55 minutes, I'm just going to sit and listen. Understand what's troubling them. Understand what pains they have, what they're suffering through, what's hurting them. And I got 5 minutes. Francis Schaeffer could probably communicate the gospel in 5 minutes. It took me 7 or 8. But I don't even think he's doing that. I think he's offering them a sliver of hope that the gospel provides, that speaks directly to their circumstance and speaks directly to their life and what they're dealing with. Are you guys with me? Do you see the difference? Is there a difference? It's called gospel fluency. So what does it take to become fluent and be able to share the gospel naturally in everyday conversations? What does it take to do that? Number one, it takes you to know the gospel and its implications. Look, if you feel convicted and motivated to share the gospel, if you do, I hope you do. I don't assume you do. I hope you do. By the end of this week, you probably will more than when you came here. If you do, it takes discipline and work to actually know the gospel and understand it, and understand its implications. We kind of piecemealed it together here, and I understand the environment. It's a little bit weird. And if I gave you 20 minutes with a pad of paper, you'd probably write something immaculate, something better than I communicated to my friend. It'd probably be amazing. You got to know the gospel and its implications. Not just know the gospel that Jesus Christ died for my sins so I could go to heaven. That's not the gospel. That's a piece of the gospel. That's not the gospel. You got to know the gospel. You got to know its implications. You have to understand why it's good news. Why is it good? Not just because it saves you for eternity. That's great. Actually, that's amazing. That's probably the best part of it. But it actually is good for you here and now. Why is it good? A note here, start with you and your life before you start thinking about others. Start with you and your life. Why is it good to you? Are you stressed? Are you anxious? Are you bitter about something? Are you wrapped up in drama with friends and it's painful? Did you just go through a breakup, or is it somebody that you're quite interested in not that interested in you? You're feeling crap about yourself? Is that really you? Do you feel that? Do you experience that? Start with you. Why does the gospel provide hope for you? Why is it good news for you? What does it do for you? The second, listen well to people. You need to listen well to people, like Francis Schaeffer said. Spend most of your time listening. People will tell you the areas of their life that they're needing hope for. They will tell you. You got to listen closely. They won't come out and say, hey, Andrew, I'm struggling. You might have hope for me. What is the hope in Jesus Christ that you have for me? Probably won't say that, right? They're going to tell you. They're going to tell you what they're struggling with. They're going to tell you how they're suffering. They're going to share their heart with you, and you're going to be able to identify where they need hope, what they need to know, what would be good news to them. Listen well. You need to develop a loving and trusting relationship with them, the kind of relationship they actually want to hear what you have to say. So number one, you need to understand the gospel and its implications. You need to know it. If you know Jesus, you love Jesus, you should get to know the gospel and its implications. You need to listen well to people. Listen really well. Don't be quick to respond. Don't have it in your back pocket typed up, point 1 to 5. Right? Listen. Identify where they're needing hope. You need to identify the unbelief, which is number 3. Identify the unbelief. Remember, we talked about the way that hope is activated is belief. The way that the gospel is actually activated in your life is belief. In an ultimate sense, you need to believe that Jesus Christ is Lord to experience salvation in an ultimate sense. On a daily basis, you need to believe that Jesus Christ is Lord to experience salvation or sanctification on a daily basis. Belief is what activates the gospel in your life. It is what provides the hope. And you need to identify the unbelief. Again, you can start with yourself. Start processing why you're feeling and thinking and acting the way you are, and start to question, what is it that I'm believing that's leading to this? Because there's a belief there. Identify the unbelief. Here's some questions you can ask yourself when you're trying to identify the unbelief. You don't have time to write that out. Maybe you can take a picture. How does this experience look through the lens of the gospel? That's a good question. What does the gospel say about this experience? What about Jesus' work might be good news to this person today? Right? Yes, they need to know that Jesus died for their sins and they can experience forgiveness in him. They need to know that. But what today do they need to know about the work of Jesus Christ that's actually going to provide hope for them? That's going to be good news to them, for them to hear and understand. 3, how can I bring the gospel, or the hope of the gospel, to bear light on this person's circumstance? What does the gospel say about their circumstance again? And this one, how can I communicate answers to these questions to them in a language that they understand and is accessible? How can I communicate answers that are accessible and understandable? Here's a no. Christianese, Jesus talk without context doesn't work. I went to a wedding recently. A friend of mine got married. They're relatively new Christians. If you know anything about the Toronto area, like 95% of people aren't Christians. So it's like there's not a lot, right? And so we're at this wedding. They're recent believers. And they have a pastor who comes from kind of a more conservative church background who kind of did their ceremony. And the pastor gets up there. And he spends a good 20 minutes just preaching the gospel through like the kind of marriage context, talking about Jesus and the bride and Christ and referring to their marriage. And he did an amazing job. Like, guy went to seminary, 100% graduated with a master's of divinity. I know it. All the language he was using was immaculate. It was right. It was the right language. Knew exactly what he was saying. I knew exactly what he was saying. I'm the only one. My wife didn't know what he was saying. And she loves Jesus and has her whole life, right? He did an amazing job sharing the gospel message. Except for no one heard it, understood a word he said, and cared one bit. It didn't provide hope for anybody. What good is that? You might know the language, but if somebody else doesn't know the language, it's not helpful, it's not useful, it just doesn't work. Christianese, Jesus talk without context doesn't work, and the truth is most of the time you don't have to give context. If you do, awesome. If you don't, you need to think of a better way to communicate it that people understand, that's in language they understand. You don't compromise it, but there's different language you can use to communicate what the gospel is and the hope it provides that people can understand. Another note on that, people don't know what you know. So don't use words and language that won't make sense to them. I kind of talked about that. And if you have a relationship with them, here's the key. There's always more to share. I remember when I was young, when I was a young pastor and I was just starting out, and I got the first few opportunities to preach on Sunday morning, every young guy makes this mistake where they get up there on Sunday. I don't know if pastors in the room, you can understand. You get up there and you feel like you have to touch on all the major things because you're like, this is my chance, right? So you're up there and you're touching on this aspect and this key doctrine and this theological perspective and this nugget of wisdom and information, right? You spend 30 minutes talking about 100 different things and you think, I did my job. And then you get off the stage and everyone's, I don't understand a word you said. I didn't hear any of it. There was way too much going on. I had to learn that there should be chances to fill in the blanks, to fill the holes in. If I have a relationship, which is the best way to do evangelism and share the gospel, there will be time and space to fill in the blanks, to fill in the holes. You got to trust that. And the fourth is that you need to respond with hope. Respond with hope. Here's what you can think. If I lived as though Jesus was Lord, the hope I would experience in this circumstance is this. You practice empathy, put yourself in their shoes, and you think, if I lived as though Jesus is Lord, if I believe Jesus is Lord, i.e. lived as though that's true, this is the hope that I would have in this circumstance. Put yourself in their shoes, and then what you can do is you can share it with them. If they lived as though Jesus is Lord, you don't have to use that language, they may not understand it, but this is the hope that would be there for them, that the gospel provides. Respond with hope. What time is it?
At 12.
Yeah, we got a few minutes here. What we're going to do is we're going to try it out. Here's something you need to know. Has anybody learned a new language before? I failed at all the languages I tried to learn. In Canada, they force you to learn French up until grade 9. There's two types of students in Canada. One, students that excel in it and get higher paying jobs. Two, the students that the teachers go, I don't want you anymore, here's a 50. I was the 50. Not great with languages. I tried Hebrew in seminary. Same sort of thing. You pass. Just don't take it again. You think about gospel, you think about it as a language. It's something you have to learn, something you have to understand. It's something that you have to grow in. It's something that you have to actually practice. And the best place to practice is with your other Jesus-following friends, because you know what? We all live in unbelief all the time, right? We're all living with a little bit of unbelief right now. And it's not a whole lot different than your friends who don't know Jesus are living with. And so what we're going to do for the next 5-6 minutes is, this room doesn't allow itself to it, but we'll figure it out. You can get up with a couple people, 2, 3 max, stand up with them. You can select one person who's actually going to be vulnerable and honest about something that they're dealing with.
Oh boy.
A struggle that they're having, an anxiety that they're having, a bitterness that they're holding on to, a relationship that's falling apart. One person's going to share that, and then another person's going to respond with hope. You're going to listen, you're going to hear, you're going to process what hope does the gospel actually offer to their circumstance. And you're going to try and respond with that hope. What would happen if they lived in belief? What would life look like? How would they experience? You're going to practice that and try it. And then we'll close out here, okay? So I'll give you 5 minutes, stand up, find someone you're familiar with-ish, or if you're here alone, find someone who looks safe and comfortable to you.